The symbolism of the fence in August Wilson's play. Introduction. In August Wilson's play, the fence is a crucial element materially present and constantly referred to by the characters in various contexts. Moreover, for each character, the wall has a unique meaning, which is the reason for the many semantic layers of this character in the play. While some perceive it as a way to protect themselves and their families, for others, it is a limitation. Describing the perception of the fence by different characters, Wilson physically embodies the existing social trends toward the black population in the 1950s. Therefore, this paper analyzes the various perspectives of perception of the fence by the characters of the play. Fence as protection. The apparent perspective of the fence in the play is its function to protect the Maxon family from the outside world. The head of the family, Troy, having experienced racial prejudice that destroyed his hopes of becoming a professional baseball player, wants to protect his family. The fence symbolizes a specific barrier against external influences that could threaten the family's happy future. Troy and his family constantly face discrimination in everyday life and at work, such as when blacks are denied the right to drive the truck and are only allowed to collect the garbage. Therefore, the fence the protagonist builds around his house is a physical barrier behind which the family can feel safe. It serves as a barrier against the harsh realities of racism, poverty, and uncertainty outside of it. Troy's wife, Rose, also sees the fence as a way to protect her family from the outside world. However, in her perception, the fence probably has a more sacred meaning. In one of her prayers, Rose asks Jesus to be a fence all around me every day. Hence, she perceives the fence not just as a physical fence but also as a spiritual one. Like her husband, Rose builds a fence around himself and his family. However, this fence is intangible and has no physical embodiment. Initially, it is challenging to determine the actual reason why Troy decided to build a fence. However, in the second act, it becomes clear that Troy, like his wife, perceives the fence as a spiritual protection. Fearing death and turning to Mr. Death, Troy says, "I'm gonna build me a fence around what belongs to me, and then I want you to stay on the other side." Different levels of perception of the fence by the protagonist testify to the complexity of Troy's character and his perception of the outside world. At the same time, other characters perceive the fence as a limitation, which causes misunderstandings in the family. Fence as a constraint. While the older generation perceives the fence as a tool for protection, Troy's son Corey perceives it as restricting his freedom. Bono says that some people build fences to keep people out, and others build fences to keep people in. It is how Rose and Troy's desire to protect Corey from the outside world can be described. Although the characters wish well for their son, they make his happy future impossible. The division into us and them is familiar to Corey's parents, so their dreams and aspirations are limited. Even when Troy wonders about the distribution of work responsibilities between blacks and whites, he talks about it at home, in safe territory. He cannot overcome racial differences and shifts the same burden on his son. Because of his father's fears, Corey is forced to give up his dream of playing football professionally and will likely repeat his father's fate. Troy does not want his son to have the same experience he had himself, claiming, "The white man ain't gonna let you get nowhere with that football, no way." However, Troy is 53, and since his youth, society has changed. Therefore, although others are more tolerant of people of color, the protagonist independently separates his family from society. The fence becomes a physical representation of the restrictions placed on the characters, isolating them from the possibilities and experiences beyond it. Moreover, the fence has a symbolic meaning of the embodiment of racial prejudices and restrictions imposed on African Americans in the 1950s by the society that the author was trying to convey. Ironically, Troy succumbs to discrimination and builds a fence, demonstrating his acceptance of segregation. By creating a fence around the Maxons, the author physically manifests the segregation, discrimination, and social inequality that people of color face. In addition, Wilson's obsession with the fence reflects the desire for protection and stability in the African American community during a period marked by significant social change. Even though society is becoming more tolerant, years of experience of oppression are forcing African Americans to isolate themselves from the rest of the community. Thus, the author demonstrates how the initially violent segregation and exclusion of African Americans from society have become a social norm that characterizes the life of people of color. Conclusion. The symbol of offense in August Wilson's play has different perspectives and levels of perception by other characters. Thanks to this, the author manages to embody several concepts that the fence symbolizes at once, mainly segregation and discrimination, which have become familiar to whites and blacks. Rose and Troy see the fence as a means of protection from the dangers of the outside world, as racial discrimination. At the same time, for Corey, the fence represents the limits to his future, set not so much by discrimination as by his father's prejudices. Moreover, by building a fence around his yard, Troy personally gives a physical embodiment to racial bias, which has become an integral part of society in the perception of African Americans. Thus, through different perspectives on the fence, Wilson creates a rich and subtle portrayal of the African American experience and its resilience in the face of adversity.